Hello all, welcome to video series on WK Studio. Please note these videos include apps from different projects to explain the particular functionality or feature, and videos are rendered using different browsers. That means apps are actually rendered on different browsers, sometimes on Chrome, Firefox, or Edge. So let me run through what WK Studio is all about, and then we'll go to specific interfaces to explain what is the functionality of each interface and so on. So WK Studio is a do-it-yourself, completely web-based, rapid and configurable application development platform. It is a kind of web-based IDE, integrated development environment, and can be hosted on a cloud as a platform as a service. Configurable means the objects used in the app can be modified and new ones can be added based on the requirement. So, for example, there can be predefined database queries defined externally. There can be a data tables and memory tables externally defined, and they can be invoked inside the code just using ID. And the parameters can be passed at runtime based on the requirement. So, for example, if some row is to be retrieved from a data table, then data table id and id of row can be passed to that, so it will just return the object in JSON or XML, based on the requirement. And sometimes the parameters values are automatically populated at runtime. So WK Studio has a lot of web-based user interfaces to create and configure various data objects externally, which are referred and invoked in the rules code as well as in various other objects using product high productive programming language, or you can call as a 4GL supported by WKS. This reduces the writing of core code to the great extent because most of the objects are configured externally without crowding inside the for example, no need to create a data table, add a row inside the code. They can be done externally by connecting a query to a database table. The architecture is fundamentally based on the state-of-the-art rule engine based on expert system technology blended with effective and optimal use of three-tier multi-tenant web-based architecture. Apps are based on rule-based technology and therefore can be modified on the fly. Interface can be more simpler and intuitive. Apps can be built to ask, invoke, or show only relevant information in the context instead of crowding a lot of functionality and UI elements like a typical application. That means the application can be very contextual, asking only very relevant information based on what user is looking for or what functionality user wants to execute. There are many interfaces in WK Studio. Database interfaces allow to manage database objects such as queries, tables, views, functions, procedures, like a typical database front ends like Hithi or Workbench offers. ML interface helps to quickly build ML models. Most of the typical functionality required for such modeling or ML training like data management, data selection, pre-processing, model selection, creating various experiments using data sets, storing experiments into the database, storing models into database, and so on. So it's like an ML front end, this one. And ML functionality is executed using ML server backed by generic Python code behind the scene. There are many configuration components such as email, charts, upload documents, QR and barcodes, CAPTCHA, PDF generation, data import, data entry, management of data objects are supported by WK Studio, and some of these can be configured at runtime as well. WK Studio is like a one-stop shop for development of business applications. Since based on the expert system technology at core, WK Studio application, its development and execution are fundamentally different from the way the conventional programming languages Java and C++ are developed and executed at runtime. Since it's based on the expert system technology, wide categories of apps right from advisory, chatbot, diagnostic to conventional business applications are possible. This is a technology stack of WK Studio. So it's a typical three-tier architecture. So on the left-hand side is the presentation services, typically front end, supported by integration of APIs, HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, and so on. So that since it's integrated with responsive web page, CSS, and HTML, The pages can be rendered on devices like mobile devices, or it can be on laptop or desktops and so on. On the right hand side, data services. So WK Studio supports integration with MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, MS Access, and Excel. There is an XML SQL engine which actually converts data from SQL to XML when the data is actually fetched from database, and when data is updated, it's converted from XML to SQL. Now current version JSON is being used as a conversion part of it. So typical if you look at on the top, it's a multi-tenant architecture. So there can be a multiple tenants hosted on a particular uh, server. There can be multiple projects within the tenant. There can be multiple app groups and apps within the projects, and there can be multiple sessions go on for every app. So for example, the projects can be divided into depending on the like departments. So HR department, marketing department. So HR department can have its own application, and each project can have a centralized database, or each project can have its own database. It depends on how they are actually connected architecturally, so on. So middle layer has a lot of interfaces like forms and reports. Then rules can be built, vocabulary can be built, apps can be created, there can be user defined function and so on. So there are many interfaces which allow to create a complete configurable objects. Then there's a core engine like AI, ML, and rule engine, and some addition is being done, which actually can facilitate rapid application development, as well as robotic process automation and so on. So at the bottom there is a rule-based fourth generation language and expert system engine, and all global objects can be accessed by rule engine, at runtime. So on. So let's quickly go through the interfaces which are supported by. These are major interfaces we are going to go through, and then we can go into details of each interface later on. So WK Studio is logically divided into multiple groups. Like on the left hand side, when you click on domain vocabulary, you will see the tabs on the top. So vocabulary contains all the variables, then data tables, memory tables, predefined range of values and so on. They're all part of domain vocabulary. Okay, and then there is a core engine, database interfaces, and so on. Let's go through them. So domain vocabulary is like a dictionary of all variable objects, domain objects, predefined range of values, domain values, memory tables, generic attributes, and so on. Variables are mapped to database tables and fields. Values can be retrieved, transformed, and populated and updated to the database at runtime without requiring any code based, inside the, rule, and because they are configured, externally. Variables can be seamlessly accessed at the front end, like in JavaScript. Implement business logic using stored procedure or functions, or Python, or code written in WK's PL at backend as query parameters. So, for example, if you take customer age as a variable in a group customer, so it can be accessed in JavaScript for say validation. It can be used in stored procedures or business logic, or it can be used in queries. The same variable, one doesn't need to change the variable name when they are accessed at a three layer. Each object can be configured with a lot of runtime UI and formatting and session parameters. For example, UI parameters such as HTML control, validation script, predefined validation. Variable objects can get the values from database or by executing a query, or by executing a Python function, or PLSQL function, or even database function, and so on. This reduces effort of adding code inside the rule because they are externally invoked. So for example, a query can be connected to a variable. When that particular variable is required, it actually can get the value from database. So memory and data tables are externally configured, loaded at runtime, reducing again need to write code inside the rules. And these tables can be manipulated inside the code. Unlike conventional programming, where all these objects are created inside the code. Core engines include state-of-the-art rule engine, case-based range engine, and ML interfaces. It has interfaces to create user-defined function. Expert system interface is used to create and manage business rule, while user-defined function facilitates development of reusable function. The programming language provides more than 345 high-level statements manipulating databases, memory tables, data tables, variables, forms and reports, session and cookie object, matrix and charting objects. So for example, load from DB function uh, just loads the data using predefined queries from predefined uh, database. It doesn't need to write code to connect to database, retrieving record set and so on. Everything is done by just one statement. CBR engine is used to define and manage a lot of semantic domain knowledge about the entities. ML front end already discussed. It helps to quickly build ML models. ML models can be invoked at runtime inside the business rule, and they populate results into memory tables, which can be manipulated using various functions supported by WK Studio at runtime. Database interfaces include interfaces to make connection to databases, predefined parameterize queries for various purposes. The variable values are populated at runtime. Variable database field mapping for data retrieval, transformation, and updates. It's like a mini ETL kind of functionality can be implemented. Data import and transfer from various sources such as CSV, text, and XLS file, and so on. Mapping between spreadsheet objects and variable objects, and functions for data pre-processing, and so on. Most of these objects are automatically invoked at runtime and manipulated inside the business logic. For example, a variable employee eligible special leave can be taking value from database at runtime based on the context whenever it is required and so on. Or it can be a web page corresponding to a variable like item list from inventory can take list of values from database. System interfaces, as you see on the top, there are a lot of tabs there. Like it can be used to create and manage app. It can be used to manage the files on the server, set user-based and role-based access right, configure project, take backup and restore and manage various parameters about the tenant and so on. So these are system interfaces to quickly create and manage various types of application in just few steps. Share, publish apps and their objects to other tenants and project. Manage various JavaScript, Python, and files on the server, as discussed. Typically, many such kind of tools they have forms and reports. So WK Studio also facilitates to create forms and reports interactively. Uh, it also has a drag and drop interface for creating forms using just a drag and drop kind of controls. There are large number of parameters that can be set and configured about forms, tables, rows, and each element of the form and reports. This reduces need to manage the business logic again at runtime. Each form can be configured to display specific control based on the app context, like buy transaction versus sell transaction. The transaction form will display only relevant UI part. The CAPTCHA, barcodes, QR codes, emails can be embedded inside the forms and reports. The PDF parameters can be configured inside the form to generate formatted PDFs at runtime and so on. This is a typical app screenshot. WK Studio can be used to develop enterprise scale applications, uh, connecting various application and having a common framework at the bottom. No? So you see here course management, employee management, inventory application, atom application, layout, library management. They are all developed on the top of WK Studio using WK Studio programming language. Now let's go through a little bit deeper on some of the interfaces. So this is a variable interface. On the left hand side, I have actually uh, taken domain vocabulary as a menu option. Within that, there is a tab, global variable. When that tab is clicked, it actually shows the entire interface. On the left hand side, there is a tree structure helps in navigating or drill downing the various objects. So for example, here there are multiple apps, cart apps, then case diary apps, config apps, then inventory apps, and so on. And when you click on a particular apps, it shows what are the variable groups used then in that app and so on. So this is a typical interface WK Studio has, which has multiple accordions. If you see, this is one accordion, second, third, fourth, and fifth, and they are actually enabled based on the variable type or based on the option selected. So this is a typical interface, and let me go through one of the variables in detail. So just I just clicked on party, and then within party I clicked on email ID. So when you select a variable on the right hand side, it actually shows the complete details of that variable. There are hundreds of parameters which can be set, basic parameters, input output parameters, formatting options, HTML options, and so on. So here WK Studio supports multiple data types as a typical programming language, right from big number to boolean to date, document, double, matrix, and so on. Okay, this is typical this one, and there are quite number of parameters as you see on the screen. And then based on the functionality, there can be other dynamic parameters which can be set. For example, what is the minimum value variable to be set, which will automatically set the value minimum maximum at runtime. What is the default variable value? Then for example, what are the image parameters, like from where the image will be loaded if it happens to be a document image variable, and so on. So there can be a lot of parameters which are defined runtime. There can be a parameters, like for example, here if you see, like whether variable values to be saved as a context or a variable value can be a multilingual, and so on. So these parameters can be set. Now, when at the execution time, a particular variable can take values from multiple sources. It can take from a simple predefined menu. It can take from database dynamic menu at runtime based on the context, or it can take from executing a query from, a database, or it can even retrieve the data from a spreadsheet, based on the requirement. Or when that variable is invoked, a particular form can be invoked at runtime. Again, there are a lot of code which can be added, like whenever a variable is needed, whether a particular functionality is to be executed, or whenever a variable is added, you want to set other variables that can be set here, based on the requirement. There are a lot of formatting options which can be included when a variable is declared. Like for example, here if it is using barcode, then barcode parameters can be used. If it is using QR code, then QR code parameters can be set, or even C sharp format can be set based on the requirement. Again, whether at the output level, language output is to be shown, or capitalize each word, or show image, all these parameters can be set. These are HTML parameters at runtime. So, for example, email ID as a variable. So it says it's going to take the value in text box. Email ID is supposed to be entered, and so on. Okay, and there can be like whether input is mandatory, whether it is as a search page or home page. All these UI parameters can be set. Again, when a variable is invoked or a web page corresponding to a variable is invoked, one doesn't have to write code inside the JavaScript. There's a lot of JavaScript code is already pre-written, and it can be invoked based on the requirement. So, for example, here, if the developer clicks on is email ID, automatically validation of email ID is done inside the JavaScript or a web page, or it can be at least one alphabet. So bottom line is all this code one doesn't need to write inside the uh, rule. They can be generated by the system when the web pages are uh, created. Similarly, as I told previously, the JavaScript can actually include various uh, WK Studio variables, and at runtime, the JavaScript actually converts them into JavaScript equivalent variables, so that the validations and other things can be done at runtime. Uh, WK Studio supports multilingual. Like here, if you see carefully, here language Hindi is selected, and there is a corresponding prompt. That means whenever a value is asked by a web page, it will show this as a prompt, and this is actually integrated through Google Translator API. So if this button is clicked, it automatically converts English text into corresponding selected language text. This is a menu interface which helps to have a predefined kind of values, including a lot of UI elements as a part of it. So here, for example, young lives options, is given, and there are like multiple options, first, second, third, and for each option, image can be selected. An image can be uploaded, based on the requirement. So this basically takes care of a lot of UI aspect at runtime, so that the code again need not be crowded at uh, rule level and so on. Similarly, here also you can see like look, Hindi language is used. So here option Hindi is selected, and this is again the translated text from Google Translator API. So at runtime, if the app is running in a multilingual mode, it automatically selects the particular options from that language. So again, one can see a page at runtime. Like there is an option to preview the web page. So whenever that option is clicked, you can see how a page is going to look like at runtime. And based on what control is selected. So here the control selected is a Dropbox. So it's actually showing Dropbox here. You know, Similarly, if it is a language text, it can actually, this is running in Hindi language now. So it's actually, here language selected is Hindi. So that's what in preview page, it's showing Hindi, language web page. So based on the context behind the scene, all the rules and everything will be written in English, but at front end or at input level, it is translated into particular. And these are all predefined web page. So it actually reduces a lot of load on the server at runtime. However, some of the pages actually invoke dynamically. That means they take the values at runtime from databases or from other source and so on. This is a lookup table interface. That means it's a data table interface. Like here, if you see this one checkbox, it's using database table. So this is like predefined queries, and with predefined database, it actually retrieves the data at runtime and loads that data into memory table and or data table, and they can be accessed at runtime. So this is just one example where this data is stored. So there is an option here, load values, show values. So I've just clicked on show values. So it's actually showing me a data table value stored in that particular data table, and it can be accessed using ID. For example, suppose I give ID 8. When I'm retrieving the value, it actually retrieves the value category, entity ID, L1, L2, and so on. Or I can write a query, for example, get me all the data starting with L1 is equal to money, this one. So all these functionalities can be possible. This is a rule interface, like I'm on tab now, core engines. So here if you see, this is a rule based interface, and this is a rule editor, what you see here. This is a rule editor window. It uses a different colors for keywords, functions, and operators and letters, like a typical programming language code. It uses the different color combination based on the tokens which are used in the whatever program written. And as discussed earlier, this is one of the application, enterprise level application, having more than 75 rules as a part of it. So here, if you, for example, look at create app user, this is just one function, but it does a lot of job behind the scene. So there are a lot of high level functions like login app user, which takes the parameter and does a lot of things behind the scene. Similarly, called UDM function. This is again user predefined functions are there. There are more than 100 functions which are used to execute functionality behind the scene. The interface allows to access variable in each group. So, for example, there are multiple groups. So, whenever you select a particular group, the variables are populated, and then within that what are the values that variable takes. However, it can be actually done at runtime also, like if you say dot v, it actually displays what are the possible values of variable actually takes. For example, if you take leave as an example, employee dot leave, then there can be a casual leave, there can be earned leave, there can be a medical leave. So all these values will get populated whenever a developer is writing a rule and so on. So this is like one of the function I was talking about. WK Studio has a universal data model. That means the enterprise level schema is already part of WK Studio, which has a lot of predefined functions. So the advantage is developer doesn't have to write a lot of code. So for example, here it actually says create simple party, and these are the parameters actually it takes at a runtime, and it creates the user. Party means it's like it can be an employee, it can be a student, or it can be any user for that matter. It's automatically created at the backend. No code is required. So there are many high-level session, database, matrix, memory table, data table functions supported by WK Studio programming language. This saves a lot of explicit coding inside the rule, making rules smaller. And it supports more than 345 functions in various categories. We'll see them down the line. And as you see, this is a rule interface, and there are a lot of options. For example, you can search a rule, you can add a rule after selected rule. You can create a new rule, add before, and you can change the name of the rule and so on. Okay, based on the coding requirement. Okay, so this is on the left hand side. I discussed these are like rules of an ERP kind of application having more than 75 plus rules, each rule corresponding to a specific functionality. For example, create a new card invokes a new form to enter a card details and so on. Rules can have many conditional statements depending on the functionality implemented. This rule is generic rule which actually updates a lot of entries like item, party, transaction, and so on. Okay, and as you say now, WK Studio supports various control statement like switch and kind of statement and so on. This is an expanded view of rule editor, so you can developer can actually edit the rule in a bigger window compared to the smaller window and so on. This is like uh, when a developer clicks on view rules, it actually shows rule in a more tree-like format, where tree can be expanded or it can be collapsed. Then it actually connects a lot of rule if there are sub rules or something, connected to modify. So rules can be added, modified in rule tree format, and it automatically connects the rule based on the hierarchy and dependency. So this is an example like new statement can be added, existing can be updated, or one statement can be moved from one rule to another rule and so on, and then can be copied and pasted and so on. So there are multiple things can be done using UI based operation. This is a show dependency. That means when the rules are compiled, they are actually, developer can write the rules without bothering about the hierarchy, but internally the reasoning engine automatically connects them. So, for example, here there is a rule for, plant is short, and there are three statements here, but they are actually sub part of. For example, rule deficiency observed is phosphorus, is one. So it can go to any level, up to 5 level or 6 level, depending on the how rules are written and so on. As discussed earlier, WK Studio programming language has 345 functions, operators, and control statements, and there is a lot of tool tip and online help is available whenever required. So this is just a sample, help. So for example, add to data. I think the selection is add to data, which is selected. So here you can see this function add to date, and these are all possible combinations. You can actually retrieve a day part, month part, year part, or quarter part depending on the requirement. And whenever a particular function is selected, automatically the possible values are actually populated. So for example, this function get from memory table, it retrieves a particular data based on the condition or any particular row or particular column can be retrieved. So here it shows a row can be retrieved, row can be retrieved in string, column can be retrieved, column with IDs can be retrieved. So there are options, based on the requirement and so on. Again, whatever various objects like database object or ML object or menu objects which are used uh, you know in a particular project, they can be accessed in a rule. So for example, here it's showing artificial neural network. It shows case-based reasoning. So here, for example, a dynamic query is selected. So whenever a dynamic query is selected, automatically it actually populates whatever dynamic query is used in the project. So here, for example, for a cart application, there are many predefined queries are there. For example, DQ cart status, DQ first ID, and so advantage is they can be easily added into code or any other objects which is actually using queries as a part of it. User defined function allows to create reusable functions. So this is one function which actually says whenever a target entity ID changes, what to do. Here again, there are options. For example, here Python can be integrated. It can be a PL/SQL PL, or it can be an external API. And here there are Google APIs and other APIs are connected. Again, functions can be created for multiple uh, purposes. It can be a general purpose function, or it can be a function whenever a particular variable value is added, what is need to be done, or whenever needed kind of, or it can be an objective function of a genetic algorithm and so on. So functions, even they can be used as a transformation. Whenever a data is fetched from database, it can actually transform the value into whatever values needed and so on. This is WK Studio programming language help. There are large number of functions which are supported. They are actually categorized into different category. So these are all neural network functions. So you can create a neural network, you can get an NN, reset NN, and so on. Then there are functions, for example, various app management functions. So create app user, remove app user, get app user type. These are functions which actually help in uh, app user management and so on. There are a lot of control function like a typical programming language, if then else switch while for functions supported by WK Studio programming language. There are database functions, for example, call DB routine. It just calls SP. No need to write a code to call SP, and you can pass the parameter. You can even pass the out parameter to that. And SP can be called from Oracle. It can be from SQL Server, or it can be from Postgres, or from MySQL and so on. So you can delete the data from database without requiring any code to explicitly return and so on. There are file functions supported. So for example, load document from DB. So it can be a JSON document, it can be it can be XML document and so on. So basically, it needs an access to a particular server directory. And this is typically done since it's a multi-tenant architecture. User is restricted to access the data only within a specific folders and so on. Lookup table allows to retrieve the data at runtime from memory tables, math functions, and again there are a lot of memory table functions which specifically used to store the data and retrieve the data, manipulate the data based on requirements. Similarly, there are a lot of matrix function. In fact, WK Studio programming allows you as a developer to multiply matrix, to inverse the matrix. The large number of functions are part of it. Then there are Python functions which can be used. For example, call Python API, call Python function. So libraries can be included using external source, and then code can be executed. It can even create an instance, and that instance can be a function in that instance can be executed, or a variable in that instance can be initialized, and so on. The large number of session functions provided to keep track of sessions, store the session in database. You can restart from a particular session. That means suppose a session is going on and user wants to stop at a particular point. The entire session can be stored in database or in XML file on a client itself, and it can be again restored back to continue what the user has left back and so on. This is consolidated list of all the functions supported by WK Studio programming language. Okay, as you said, it's a big list of function and so on. And then each function has a detailed help available. So for example, ML config. So this is a help about ML config. So basically this execute the tasks for selected ML config and returns the result. And parameters are actually can be passed at runtime, or they can be retrieved from database by just giving the ID. Now this is a code simple like run regression model in a training that it's saying, and take the data where ID is greater than equal to 1. Okay, and then it says show only stat and so on, and these are all runtime parameters like based on what algorithm or APIs written behind the scene, the parameters can be passed them at runtime. Similarly, like if you take a function get from DB, it actually shows like data can be retrieved from database. So what are the parameters? Database ID, and optionally can be a table name. Then what is a query from where the data is going to be retrieved, and this is externally defined. And what is an option to be retrieved? So if you see here, there are many options. It can be a set, it can be a characteristic set, it can be a card, comma delimited, or it can be a complete record itself, which actually is in list format, this one. So if you see this result, it actually has retrieved the entire data from database by executing the function. Now within that option, there are like, for example, here, this is an option used to retrieve the data, and there is a extensive help available what exactly it does. Like for example, here if you use the parameter JSON, that means it gets the data in JSON format. Guys. I think there's a need to change the documentation. WK Studio has extensive help interface, like any help required about the interface, that's actually part of it. So for example, here if you just type chart here, it shows the document which actually shows how the charts are drawn in WK Studio. WK Studio has a graphic charting function which has large number of parameters to set, like a typical charting tool. You can actually set the colors, ranges, then grid type, legends, then you can set markers, marker size, type of markers, and so on. All these are possible. And again, WK Studio is integrated with JQplot. So finally, the charts can be rendered using JQplot, and there's a integration done with the database as well as core code of the WK Studio and JQplot. Now Plotly is also integrated, so uh, you know the developer can configure to display the charts using Plotly, which is an open source. This is just document showing working with Python in WK Studio, how Python code can be written and integrated into WK Studio. This is working with JavaScript in WK Studio, how JavaScript actually take the various validation and script based on the requirement and so on. This is an ML interface. Just quickly introduce you to ML interface. So when you click on machine learning tab in engines, you can see this is a typical interface displayed, which has again large number of parameters. So on the left hand side, what you see like this is a database selected MLDB, which has pre-configured various models in classification, clustering, regression, time series, matching, reuse, association, mining, and so on. These are predefined type of models supported by WK Studio. So one can build a classification models, clustering models, regression, and so on. So it allows you to build, train, test, and store ML models. Later on, can be invoked at runtime as well as called externally through ML APIs. So they can be invoked in other application easily. So let me go through this. Okay, so here when you click on classification, it shows all the models which are already trained and stored in database. Now let's select one model. So for example, here SME. These are actual practical real-time models which are done on. So this is a small sector, small and medium sector enterprises data. Now, as you see, like this is a classification model. you know, uh, at loaded at runtime, respond. And then like, there are a lot of parameters about that can be set. So here it is using ANN classifier. As you see here, there are many algorithms implemented like logistic regression, k-nearest classifier, support vector machine, kernel SAM, naive classifier, and so on. So based on the requirement, a particular model can be selected. So these are various classification algorithms supported by WKS and implemented through generic Python APIs at the back. Again, depending on the like requirement of a model, data can be actually fetched from any database, and then whenever a database is fetched, it actually shows all the tables in that particular database, and then runtime various parameters. For example, what are the input parameters, what are the output parameters, what are the categorical variables, all can be selected interactively. So here is bankrupt is an outcome variable, that can be set this one, and there are a lot of parameters which can be set at runtime. So this is like runtime parameters. Developer can create, or data scientists can create multiple experiments and store them in database, so they can retrieve what is an outcome of every experiment and so on. Again, when giving the input, there are again options whether user ID, especially in personalization kind of problem, can be given, or it can be in SQL filter and so on. Okay, so here this is an example. Here it shows the Keras libraries are being used, and within that, like there are multiple parameters which can be selected. Okay, so this is a classification problem addressed using Keras. So there are like outlier parameters, then sampling technique, optimizer, loss, matrices, and so on. And depending on the requirement, these parameters values can be set at runtime. So for example, here uh, this option is selected layer parameters, and it's actually showing various parameters which are set in JSON format, like type is equal to dense, unit is equal to 3, kernel initializer is uniform, activation is linear activation, and is dropout. So all these parameters can be set before uh, you know the data scientist, or the person who is actually modeling clicks on starts training and so on. Okay, so here this shows that all the data more than ID is selected as a training. So entire data set is taken as a training, and this is as a testing. So all IDs greater than 3000 are taken as a test. The advantage is like different data sets can be taken at runtime. And this is like what are the runtime parameters, like is create confusion matrix, is update to DB, is reset error graph. These options can be set before the training start and so on. Similarly, data can be seen like this show the data from whatever database stored, and you can see the data uh, in a report format, and you can sort the data, you can see the graph and everything as a part of this. This is just a sample runtime. Like when you click on training, you can see the data like this. So here it shows a lot of outcome generated by ML algorithm. Like for example, here training statistics it's showing the confusion matrix and so on. And right hand side it actually displaying the graph like is predicted versus in bankrupt. Since the accuracy is very high, the graphs of predicted and calculated is actually overlapping. This is sample regression output. Again, here your table change based on the type of algorithm, and this is a graph. Here you can see actual and predicted. And again, since it's integrated behind the scene using Plotly and JQ-plot, you can actually change the graph from line graph to bar graph. It supports at minimum 10 types of different charts as a part of UI, graph UI, and so on. Again, there is a help added. So, for example, the problem selected is a logistic regression, and here libraries are used sklearn. So, if you select logistic regression sklearn, you can see a lot of parameters there, and these are all pre-configured using external API XML file, which can be modified based on the requirement. And again, help is added for every parameters. So, if you take solver as a parameter, then what are the possible values it takes, and what those mean, and Okay, so here these are possible values solver can take. This is again a simple time series problem. Here, if you see carefully, there are different experiments. These are actually various states in India. Then within states there are various districts. Within district there are sub district, and then what are the parameters to be model. So advantage is that ML models can be developed at very decentralized level. They can be country level, they can be state level, they can be at a district level, they can be at a sub district level, and there are various indicators. So if somebody's admin is actually sitting at a district level, he or she can see the model at district level. So advantage is it can be a distributed ML kind of setup, and all these experiments are stored in database. Their training is also stored in database, and it can be retrieved at runtime. So this is actually showing like within Maharashtra state, there are various districts, and within district there are multiple sub districts and so on. This is just one example which actually shows how WK Studio ML APIs invoked at runtime. This one. So it actually shows what are the models implemented, what are the problem types, what is the technique within that. Okay, and then what is the data, it's what is the state, what is the district, and so on, and what are the indicator selected. So here can be a drop down, and it changes based on the selection of the data. When this call API is executed, you can see the output, graphical output generated by graph, which actually is like a plotly running behind the scene. The graph can be changed based on the UI requirement and so on, and even the data can be seen. So just click on the data, it actually shows the data retrieved from the this one. Even data can be restricted, so for example you can just see only 10, and then how your actual and predicted look like and so on. Or even it can be integrated to run the model at runtime. So here linear regression model is selected. Within that problem type linear regression, what is an API, get display data, and then select the data based on the availability. So here the inputs are entered, and when the calculate button is clicked, it actually shows the output. So advantage is ML APIs can be tested, they can be model using WK Studio ML interface, and they can be tested on any front end, based on the requirement. Now, this is a quick introduction to database schema manager. It's a similar functionality like Heidi or Workbench on a limited sense. It's not very highly, but it takes care of the most of the things which are required for a typical, database front end. So it supports like MySQL, Postgres, and other databases in read mode. It allows to fetch data, manipulate database objects like tables, views, functions, stored procedures, triggers, and so on. Okay, so here like there are various objects. So here it's actually showing all tables used in that particular database, and then execute query actually executes a particular gets the data from a particular table. So here current table is selected, and it shows all the fields in that table. It shows what are the data types. Like here it shows it's integer, it's a primary key, and it's also used as a unique key. This actually shows the outcome of the previous this one. Okay, and then WK Studio has a quick chart. So for example, there are here there is a symbols. The data can be sorted, or data, some rows can be removed, or some columns can be removed based on the requirement and so on. So this is just a quick graph to see the data. This one, and again the UI can be changed. For example, it can be changed from bar graph to uh, pie chart and so on, depending on the requirement. And again, there are large number of parameters which can change at a runtime. So this is like a, a, a plot interface which allows you to connect various parameters at runtime. It can be a grid, it can be legends, it can be a color, it can be axis title, y axis title, size of the graph, and so on. And again, this is a graph can be downloaded or it can be expanded depending on the functionality required and so on. Again, as I told earlier, it actually allows you to manipulate, multiple types of objects. You can see table, views, functions, SPs, triggers, and there can be objects which are actually specific to particular application. So suppose you are dealing with inventory application, so it actually shows all the tables, views which are related to that particular application and so on. So it actually helps to manage the database objects, application wise. Okay, so when views is selected, it actually shows all the views on the left hand side, and one can actually go more drill down. So similarly, like within the views, it can show what are the fields in that particular view. And there is an option here, show selected queries. Sorry, selected views. It actually shows complete view on the editor window, which can be modified based on the requirement. This is a trigger. You see all the triggers are displayed here, and this is a trigger code which is displayed, and it can be updated based on the requirement and so on. Okay, these are typical functions which are executed in a database. Like views can be created, they can be dropped, they can be selected. For example, here again, you can drop the table, you can drop the function. So depending on the requirement, the lot of functionality can be executed as a part of database interface. Then field schema interface, which allows you to add a field or update the existing one, like a typical database front end. So here you see that current field is employee ID. Its data type is integer. Okay, then size is not required. No, if it is a text data type, then size may be required. Okay, and then is non-null, is auto increment. So these options are available. So here you can rename the existing field, you can remove it, or you can uh, uh, add a new field based on the requirement and so on. So here just add a new field, it can be added and so on. Similarly, a table can be manipulated, so here it shows like you can add a table, you can define various integrity controls like primary key, unique key, foreign key, or index, and it actually displays the existing one. So here it shows like employee ID is used as a primary key. So everything is which is required to create a database, tables, fields is part of WK Studio interfaces, and with a lot of predefined functionality also based on the requirement. So this is one stored procedure loaded at runtime. This is a screenshot of that. This one. Now here again, scripts can be, like there can be a scripts which can be written, like you can store the set of scripts and then load them at runtime based on the requirement and so on. Okay, this interface talks about mapping between WK Studio variables and database tables and fields. So on the right hand side, if you see, this is a mapping. For example, item amount is mapped to uh, amount, and this is table name is left blank because it can actually take the data from any source, but it can be actually connected to a particular table in update mode and so on. Again, for each there are again various functions which are allowed. Then whether so here it shows that amount is linked to a field amount of a table. This is a view basic. So this again mapping is used for multiple purpose to retrieve the data from database, and there are again options like whether there is a transformation required, any functions to be executed at runtime and so on. So here, this is a dynamic query interface, as you say the name. These are basically predefined queries, which can be used at a runtime. So this drop down is showing for what purpose the queries can be created. So here, one of the purposes it can be for data entry, it can be for lookup tables, or it can be for use for clustering, or it can be for CPR search and so on, because it automatically checks the query and its fields based on the functionality required. Again, here you can see whatever filters, whatever fields you want to insert at runtime, everything can be part of it. Then again, what is the retrieve option? Like when the data is retrieved, whether you want to retrieve the data as character set or comma delimited or pipe delimited, or you want to check whether it has a row at runtime. That can be done. So in code you just say is data found, and then write a query. It automatically checks, executes the query and check whether it has a row or not. Okay. And again, there are can be large number of parameters which can set at a runtime, when the query is executed. You can even add to existing query. You can remove some fields at runtime based on the context or based on the requirement. You can even change the titles of the field and at runtime. Then there are some mandatory variables. That means these variables will be inserted at runtime, which actually safeguards from SQL injection kind of, because these are done through browser, through session. So external users cannot just tweak with that. So these options are possible. This just a quick overview of data import interface, which allows to import the data from CSV, Excel, and other databases. And typically it is stored with a data source name, so which can be used to retrieve the data or update the data later on. So it stores the definition of how the data is actually imported, whether it's imported from CSV file, Excel file, or what kind of file. So this is just a quick run through of how data import interface works. So this is a name of the data source, employee 10. It actually creates a corresponding table in the database. And now it is saying it is actually taken from text file. It's a new text file to be imported and so on. Here it's actually asking what is file to be chosen. Okay. So once a file is chosen from client, it actually displays the content of the that data file. This is actually CSV file, and you see there are various parameters. For example, whether the first row is header or header, replace the header spaces with underscore. Okay, and if you want to add some additional field, they can be added at runtime, based on. And again, just like a typical import interface, there are options whether it's a delimited or it's a fixed length or delimited by comma and so on. What is a date format? So everything a typical data import interface needs is a part of this data import interface. Once go to the next, click on go to the next button, it actually gets all the schema from OLEDB text driver. It's actually showing what are the columns in CSV file, and what are the corresponding database fields. So for example, it removes the spaces if there are any spaces. Then it automatically selects the data types using OLEDB driver. However, sometimes it can go wrong. So for example, here contact number is actually converted into float, but it needs to be converted into big data. So while importing, one has to be a little bit careful, like data types are properly mapped. Then data size, it's automatically picked from the data, which can be tweaked later on. Default values can be set, and sign, unsign things can be set. Another thing is like you can set a particular field as a primary key or unique key based on the requirement before the data is imported. If there is some error, for example, if there are some keywords or something, this interface throws the error and those can be corrected and so on. Again, some parameters like only distinct records or make primary auto increment, like miss here employee ID can be made auto incremented, if it's required in some cases and so on. And you can start an auto increment from a particular number based on that. So once you click on next, again it asks you whether you want to create an unique key is not part of that, and whether you want to create or not, it will automatically do it. Now, once you again click on the next, it shows number of records inserted. It says there are 34 records inserted in the this one. That means now what it has done, it has created a database, sorry, data table at the back. It has created a schema and inserted a record into this one. This is a schema file generated for currently generated data source name called employee 10. Okay, and you can see here like service ID is given. This is a unique ID given to that particular service, so it can be invoked inside the code or any other object. So it knows that the data is coming from text file. This is the source data. These are the fields and so on. And you can actually select a particular fields when you are importing the data from this one. So here it actually shows You can actually import only specific data. You can update the existing data and select whatever fields you want to. Again, you can select what is the buffer size and so on. So it actually selects the proper buffer when it's actually getting the data from uh, CSV file or whatever text file selected. Okay, and this is how, if you just refresh as a query builder, you can see the data which is actually created just now. This one. So you can see again using a report interface, you can see the data quickly, see the graphs and everything. So this makes it easier to import the data into any database easily. Now, this is just a quick introduction to form interface. Form and report interface allows you to interactively build, forms. So, form designer is used to develop and configure HTML pages. Forms and reports are divided into tables, rows, and cell elements. These are large number of parameters. There are large number of parameters which can be set at a form level, table level, row level, elements level, and some of them are used as a creation of forms report, at a creation time. Some of them are a UI element, some of them are runtime, when the form is executed and so on. So these are all form parameters which are actually set at a form level. Okay, then there are PDF parameters which can be set. For example, what kind of page size, whether orientation is portrait, what are the margins, whether it's a page within page, that can be set, along with the margins and so on. So this is like a outer page, this is normal page, so you can actually create multiple pages within this one. Then there are table parameters. So again, there are PDF parameters, certain parameters which can be set for a PDF. And like for example, whether it's a multi-page table, it includes a progress bar, count option controls. So for every table generated, there can be parameters set. Similarly, row parameters can be set. And again, for every whether table cell, there can be conditions specified. When that is to be displayed or not, made visible or not. And they can use all the variables which are used in WK Studio variable interface. Like again, there are it does a lot of things behind the scene. For example, is create variable from the field and row. That means it actually creates a complete variable. It actually does the mapping, like create a variable mapping and add that variable directly. So it saves a lot of explicit work of creating a variable, linking it to, adding it to form. This is automatically done. And there are a lot of some such functions which actually make the things more, faster, and overall it becomes more productive. Similarly, there are cell level functions. Here again, you can put a condition, you can actually add a new cell and so on. uh, again, here there are large number of parameters which can be set at this one, like what kind of content type it has. Then what are the runtime parameters, like is auto increment for form, is db parent key for form. There can be parameters at a UI level. Okay, like here is display captcha. So that means it will display a captcha instead of value at a runtime, and user can enter the captcha and so on. Okay, so similarly, there are runtime PDF parameters, whether you want to include current timestamp, okay, or page number inside the page, that can be included. There are a lot number of URL parameters. When the form is invoked, there are a lot of parameters which can be passed at a runtime based on where the form is invoked and so on. Again, dynamic parameters based on the requirement. So here what it says, like post insert query. So whenever data is inserted through form, what is the query to be executed? Then there are a lot of predefined controls and scripts which are part of this one. Okay, so like it can be a script, it can be a control, or it can be a simple style which can be used at runtime. There are a lot of predefined controls and scripts are there which can be inserted at runtime based on the requirement. For example, it can add show hide button script. It can actually create a navigation buttons, if they are not already added. This is, script interface. So scripts can be added, especially JavaScripts can be added, at runtime, when the form runs, and they can, for example, here there is a, and again, when the form is created by Visa, it includes the basic functionality like before record update, on record update. So that means this script is executed before the record is getting updated, and this at a client side, this gets executed when the record is updated and so on. Okay, there are again HTML formatting parameters based on the requirement. Like for every parameter, there can be a, again, PDF parameter here. There can be a line spacing, what kind of, for example, color, so multiple formatting parameters can be entered. This is a preview of the form. Like you can see the preview, how it looks like and so on. This is a drag and drop interface, which actually helps to interactively build forms using drag and drop object. So you can just drag the objects and drop into wherever you need and so on. Again, here a lot of parameters can be set. What are the possible values it can take? What is the element type, whether it's a numeric or all this you can actually use to create the form. Okay, and again there is an option. For example, here you can create, this allows you to create an application directly from form. So it says what is the name of the application, in which group you want to create an application, what is the variable group you want to create, where variables corresponding to fields are created. Okay, then runtime options, like when the application is created, and when just click on create, it actually creates the entire application and so on. Okay, so that's basically creating application using drag and drop interface. Now this is just a quick introduction to again manage apps, interface. This actually allows you to share, save, backup, restore, remove, apps based on the requirement, or even app objects. For example, you can choose an app. Within that, you can choose whatever group, and within that group, you can select, for example, share these group objects. That means, suppose you are creating a form for one app, you can share that form with other app, kind of for this one. So it makes like all these objects and apps, shareable and so on. In fact, when you say share app, that means entire database, all functionality is actually copied to remote. Suppose you have project P1, suppose which has an app A1, and you are moving to project P2 as an app A1. It actually copies the entire schema, views, variables, and everything to project 2, so that it can be reused more effectively. And again, there are many options as a part of this one. Can, for example, create generic templates. To Now, this is a simple demo of creating an application, from a database. So here, if you see, this is an DB app. Although there are quiz app and other kinds of apps can be created, there are parameters set. For example, this app is called as an employee 6 app. Then it says in which app group it's you want to create. Then what is an variable name? For example, employee info. In the customer, customer is predefined. You are creating a new one, that employee info. What is an icon you want to set? You can import the icon using import function, and then which, from which database table the app is to be created. So this is already imported table employee 6, and application will be created using that. Now this is the data in that particular employee 6, employee 6 table. Okay, so here you see, like, these are fields: employee ID, first name, middle name, last name, short name, and so on. Now when you click on configure table fields, it actually brings all the tables from the table, sorry, all the fields from the table. So you can see employee ID, first name, middle name, last name, and so on. And when it actually brings the schema, it actually sets some of the parameters as a default, like it is used as an input variable, it's as a DB key, because it checks in the database, it's defined as a uh, you know database as a primary key, so it automatically sets. So there are more than 25 parameters one can set, based on the requirement. So for example, here, whether you want to use this as a gender as a search field, or you want to create as a menu kind of, so that can be set at runtime. Here this shows that it can be used as an email for mobile, so it will automatically have that kind of interface and icon in mobile app when it's created and so on. So this is a complete picture, like when the app, before app is created, you can verify a lot of things. You can see what is the minimum value, maximum value, what is the default value, what is the input control, what is the data type. For every field, it actually shows what is the control size. All things can be included as a part of it. This one. And again, you can see, like, based on the advanced feature, you can select other, like whether you want to put them in a logical group, you want to give some title to the feature or prompt, or at runtime you can specify that. Now, once you click on create app, it actually tells you, are you sure to create, this one. Once you click on that, then this entire application is created, and all required files are created in the application, and it's actually a directory where all pages and everything is created by system. And what you are seeing is actually a published app. See, here it says that you have created successfully employee 6 app, and you can run that app. So when you run that app, you can see a predefined report created, form is also created. So these all templates behind the scene are created, and you can actually navigate through this one. Okay, so it shows like what are the corresponding controls are created based on the type of variable and so on. And again, it adds these buttons like add, update, and remove. That means you can add a new record, you can update the existing one, and you can remove the existing. So here again, it adds buttons. So if you just click on first, it actually loads the data into the form and so on. And there's a lot of code written behind the scene. Here again, when you are using a report, you can see, you can navigate, you can store the data, you can actually download in PDF format. All these options are available when app is created. Again, date controls, depending on the type of functionality, the corresponding controls are added to that. Then validation code is also automatically added by the system. Like here it says it should be, value should be between this to this, can be done. Now you can see the same application in mobile mode. So here it's actually mobile home. So you can see how a page is going to look like in a mobile mode. There is a UI change in mobile mode. It's basically a responsive one, and some scripts are changed in order to this one. And you can see the install button if your application needs to be installed, and uh, so on. Now, what happened behind the scene? Like when the app is created, it has created a lot of objects. For example, it has created a form. Like employee 6 form. You can actually see that form. Whenever you want to see. Okay. Now, this again, basically you can configure, like here it's like show QR code. So it's actually showing QR code. Similarly, you can show as a captcha based on the requirement. So it means that the created application can be changed based on the requirement. These are some parameters which are like a config parameter at runtime. So this shows like this can be used as a barcode to just start the application directly from URL. And again, there are large number of parameters here can be set and fine tuned based on the requirement. So here you can set a SMTP server port number for retrieving, what is a email ID to be used for sending emails and so on. Although they can be configured inside the rule, but they can be externally configured and so on. This is an interface which shows how the tenants and projects can be managed. You see like at runtime, a lot of configuration parameters, can be set. You can backup, you can restore, you can check the backup status, for a tenant, as well as you can do for a particular project and so on. So here it's a, like you can start a project, you can stop a project, you can unload. So these are typically all activities related to, project can be done provided you are logged in as a project admin. If you are not a project admin, you are not allowed to access this interface at all. So this is just a quick interfaces which show when the app is created, what it has created. So our variable group name was employee info. So it actually creates a lot of basic fields as well as additional fields. So here it's the city, contact number, country, date of birth, all are displayed. Uh, Sorry, all are generated by uh, that app wizard. Then you can see the form which is generated by app wizard in a form interface. You can see this is a preview of that form that I just showed, a response. Then this is a mapping done behind the scene. That means these entire objects are created by WK Studio when the app is created, and you can modify them later on. So here it actually shows this employee ID is connected to table employee 6, and the field name is employee ID, and it is actually connected as a primary key. Now if you just don't want people to update the code, you can actually remove this update mapping, because there are two types of mapping: read only and update mapping, and so on. Okay, similarly, it has created a dynamic query to bring the data at runtime. So these are all again created by WK Studio when the app is created. Then there are basic rules created by which actually allows you to view, add, update, delete, and show the rule at runtime. So no need to write the rule initially. This is automatically generated by app wizard and so on. Okay, so just quickly, what are the core algorithms and modules in WK Studio? So WK Studio has rule-based expert system engine, case-based reasoning engine, profile and consolidation engine, feature weight and calculation algorithms, algorithm to scan and analyze data, ML engine and genetic algorithm, and there are a lot of conversion, utilities. Like for example, it has inbuilt OCR utility, which actually scans the data and converts that into direct or populates those values into directly forms. OCR configuration can be connected to a form so that it actually reads the entire image scan data into form data. Then JSON data into database based on the configuration. For example, if you are bringing the data through API, okay, then it can actually uh, bring or convert the JSON data API to into database directly without any interventions. It saves a lot of code, this one. And then import text and Excel data and move into database and so on. So these are inbuilt utilities in WK Studio. Now, what are the application categories which are addressed by WK Studio? Right from business application to advisory to diagnostic and troubleshooting, knowledge-based intelligence system, personalization, recommendation, intelligence search, selection and match, and general ML and rule-based systems can be addressed by WK Studio. You can actually refer to documentation in go into much detail. For example, advisory application assist an end user on various subjects and matters such as legal, health, real estate, and tax. So advisory applications can be written over there. So this is just a brief information about application categories. Now, this is like features and advantages of, what are the features available in WK Studio and what are the advantages. So like WK Studio uses knowledge-based approach, sorry, that's a spelling here. It should be uses knowledge-based approach. It simplifies and expedites app development, avoid a complex and crowded interface, divides the interface into simple and manageable ones with lot of images and icons and annotation that can be done. Then it's based on the core knowledge based framework like development and configuration interfaces to build and configure UI, database access, retrieval, update. Everything is managed by core framework, so no need to write a lot of code inside. And it supports the fourth generation programming language, that as discussed, which actually provides high level construct, which makes the code much simpler and smaller. Then integration with Python and generic ML APIs. Then CSV pre-processing APIs, common vocabulary for all computing layers. It's a web-based and multi-tenant architecture. Native support for multilingual app development. Then integration with external APIs and programming languages. Inbuilt PDF designer and HTML to PDF, customizable email interface. You can actually put email parts inside the form, like for example, inbox, compose as a part of arrangement. Then inbuilt sign up, sign in, forget password, change password kind of interfaces. Another feature of WK Studio, you can create a lot of web links, and web links basically help the user directly connect to particular page. It supports a lot of bookmarks also. So as a user, you can actually select a particular functionality, bookmark it. It's like a bookmarks within the application. So suppose you are paying a newspaper bill every month, so you can actually bookmark it. So whenever you click on that particular bookmark, it actually takes you to directly a particular app functionality. So you don't have to navigate every time through predefined route and so on. Database management interfaces, which makes it easier to create, define, connect databases schemas interactively, manipulate database objects, and so on. Then inbuilt charting and dashboard. So since it's connected to JQplot, Plotly, and WK Studio has its own graphics, like functions which can be used to create different kind of charts and graphs. You know. Data import, integration with Excel, drag and drop, DB based app create interfaces, integration with other WKS technologies like case based reasoning, genetic algorithm, deep profiling, feature weight calculation. It brings in advantage of a lot of other technologies available in WK Studio. Editable SQL query reports. You can actually have a report which can be edited. Suppose you have a card, predefined field card, so user can change the quantity, based on the user requirement. So such kind of things can be done. And then pre-built universal data schema. Most of the uh, building blocks are available, which can actually help to quickly develop application, rather than spending more time on creating schema and so on. So this is all about WK Studio, a brief introduction uh, about what are the various interfaces, what are the features, what WK Studio is all about, and so on. So thank you.